Hey guys, welcome to the next episode of the 1972 GT6 restoration on the Rusty Beauties channel. We continue with the engine work today, and you might think that it is Thursday today. Nope, it's still Saturday. It's still the same day. I said that I'm going to be working every Thursday on this car, but I never said that I'm going to be working only on Thursday. So it's still Saturday. I'm still excited to see what the condition of this engine is. And David is still here. He's gonna be my writer today. So we just finished disassembling the engine. That was the previous video that you saw. And this video is gonna be just measuring and assessing the crankshaft and the block and the head lathe. But I'm really curious to find out whether I need to buy new pistons, which is gonna be the case if the block is worn too much and it needs machining. I'm really hoping that the block doesn't need machining. I just need new rings, but we will see about that. So I'm gonna start measuring. David is gonna write down all the information for me, and we're gonna see where that's gonna go. Well, I forgot to say something. Let's get crack-a-lacking. All right, as you can see here, I have my bore gauge prepared so we can measure the cylinders. But as usual, when I rebuild engines, I want to explain a little bit what exactly needs to be measured. So the cylinders are the first thing that we're going to measure. That's not very safe what I'm doing here, right? The cylinders are what we want to measure. But how do we measure them? There's not only one measurement that we want to take on the cylinders because they are deep, and since they're deep, the bore might be different at the top than at the bottom. So we'd like to take three measurements, one at the top, one at the center, one at the bottom, and then we're going to compare those measurements and we're going to figure out whether the cylinder is tapered or it is still a cylinder. The other problem though is that this circle here might not be circle anymore. It might be an oval. So we don't want to just take one measurement and consider that the bore. We want to measure three different positions. So we're going to measure once like this, once 60 degrees, and once 60 degrees more. So we can have three different measurements for the bore. And then we're going to compare those three different measurements, and we're going to find out whether the circle is still circle or it's oval. This is called out of round. We will find out whether we have out of round or not. But again, we don't want to do that only at the top. We want to do that top, center, and bottom. So we're going to take 9 measurements, and we're going to compare all these measurements. And the biggest out of round or the biggest taper that we find, that's what we're going to consider to be our final taper or final out of round. Because if that measurement is out of the tolerances, then we need to machine the block to the next, which is going to be probably 20 over. So I'm really hoping that we don't need to do that. So the standard measurement for the cylinders out of the factory, the spec measurement, is 2.9400 inches. So my bore gauge is set so it shows exactly 0 when it is at that measurement, 2.9400. And I'll show you how I set that up. I set this micrometer to this exact measurement, 2.9400. I'm not going to show how micrometer works. There's thousands of videos about how to read that measurement. So if you want to go find one, you can find. I'm not going to go that far. So my tool now, my bore gauge is set so when it is at 2.9400, it shows exactly 0 here. Or it used to be there. There you go. So it goes down. If I tilt it in one direction, it goes down. If I tilt it in the other direction, it goes back to 0, and then it goes down again. So any discrepancy from 0 is our discrepancy from 2.9400. So this is going to be my chart for one cylinder. Like we said, we're going to have 3 different heights and 3 different positions in each height for the measurement. So we're going to divide the page by 3 and 3 in this direction. So we're going to have our height, so that's going to be top, center and bottom, and that's going to be our first, second and third positions. And always my first position is perpendicular to the block, second position is 60 degrees clockwise, and third position is 60 degrees counterclockwise from perpendicular to the block. And that's important because we want to compare the same positions on the 3 different heights. We don't want to compare first position to third position on the different heights. So our tool is set to 2.9400 inches. So the difference between 0 and what our measurement is, that's how much we need to add to 2.9400 to get to the correct measurement that we have. So we're looking for taper, the maximum taper that we find, and the maximum out of round. So now I'm going to start measuring 1, 2, 3, and David is going to write them down, and then I'll show you how we're going to compare those measurements and what's going to happen with these numbers that we find. Okay, so we're starting with first cylinder, and like I said, my first position is going to be top, and it's going to be perpendicular to the block. So you see when I tilt in one position, it goes down from 0, then it reaches its maximum, and then it goes down again. So we are looking for the position which is maximum. That's the absolute perpendicular to the cylinder position. So that shows me here 21, these are 21 10,000ths. So it's 0.0021. It's actually 20. Okay, then we said my second position is going to be 60 degrees, approximately, of course, 60 degrees clockwise from first position. I know you can't see that, but it shows me 25.0025. And third position is 20 again. 20. And then we're going to do the same in the center, more or less, of the cylinder, of like height-wise. And that shows me 16.0016. Second position is 20. And third position is 20. And last, we're going to do the same at the bottom of the cylinder. That's 19, 21, and 21. So now we have all the 9 measurements of this cylinder. Now let's look at the information. That reminds me of when I'm at my dentist and my dentist is digging into my teeth and just shoots out random numbers, and then the dental assistant goes and writes something down, and then they come up with a number at the end that I don't like. So now when we compare all the 3 numbers at the top of the cylinders, first, second and third position, we can see that the smallest number is 20 10,000ths of an inch. So that's 20 10,000ths over our set number here. So the smallest number is 20, the biggest number is 25. This means that we have 5 10,000ths of an inch out of round at the top of the cylinder. And I think that's totally acceptable. I think anywhere up to 12, I think I consider good. So our out of round for this level is 5 10,000ths. Then we do the same here. Here the smallest number is 16, the biggest number is 20, so we have 4.0004. And here we have 19 and 21, so here we only have 2. So the biggest number of these three is our out of round of the whole cylinder, of the entire cylinder, because that's the biggest number. So out of round is 0.005 for this cylinder, which is good. And then we do the same for taper. We compare the first position at all levels. So the smallest one is 16, the biggest one is 21, so we have 5 10,000ths taper in first position. Now we're going to do the same for second position, 20 to 25. So we have taper of 5 10,000ths of an inch here, and here we have only one. Right, from 20 to 21. So our taper on this cylinder, the biggest one is 5 10,000ths. That's absolutely acceptable too, as long as the bore is also within tolerance. So how do we find the bore? We find the biggest number out of the 9, which is 25. So our maximum bore, the biggest place in this cylinder with the biggest bore, with the biggest measurement, is 2.9425. So this is a little bit farther than what I was hoping for, but I think I can live with that. As long as we don't have a cylinder that is more than 25 over 25, so that's 2.5 tau, just to be clear. It's 25 10,000ths or 2.5 thousandths, right? Okay, I'm gonna measure this, and David is gonna write everything. I'm not gonna film everything. I'm not gonna hold you here. I'm just gonna go do the same thing on 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and then we're gonna look together at the numbers. Okay, we already measured everything, but before I show you the numbers, I wanted to show you here. You can clearly see where the piston stops when it goes down, right? So that's where we measure the bottom, or a little bit higher than that, but we don't go lower than that because that's part of the cylinder, which is of course not going to be worn the same way as the other part of the cylinder. So you have to pay attention where the end of the stroke of the piston is, and you should consider your bottom. Okay, so these are the numbers for the other cylinders. So this is cylinder 2, and we have the biggest measurement is 9426, because it's in this position, second position of the top, and the out of round and taper are within tolerances again, 2 and 3 10,000ths. Number 3, 9422, 7 and 5 out of round, and number 4 and number 5 and number 6, and I transferred all the information from all the cylinders into this chart at the end. So number 1 is 9425, taper is 5, out of round is 5, and all the cylinders. So now in general we can tell for the engine that the biggest measurement that we found was on cylinder number 2, which is 2.9426. And the biggest taper is 0.7, and the biggest out of round is 5 10,000ths. So taper and out of round are good. The maximum measurement here, we're pretty close to 3 tau, with 2.6 tau bigger than the spec. So I don't know what I'm gonna do about that. Might need to machine it, I don't know. I will decide later, but this is the information that I need to make that decision. So I'm gonna look it up and see what the tolerance is, and we'll decide whether we want to machine it to 20 over or 200 over. Then it's going to become 2.9600. You know what I mean? So we will see. Now let's measure the journals and the pins. So now when I'm measuring the journals and the pins, I'm going to make sure to measure in few locations too, and make sure that they are not out of round as well. So I'm gonna measure here and there, but I'm not gonna But unless I have like huge differences, I'm not gonna write down different measurements, because if I have even 1 thou out of round, that's gonna be way too much for this. So in this case, we're gonna just say it needs to be machined. I'm also on the journals especially, I'm gonna measure left and right because they are pretty wide and sometimes you have them, they are tapered as well. But I believe I should have 0 out of round and 0 taper here. So I'm gonna use a micrometer. Again, I'm not gonna show you how to read a micrometer. You can go and find millions of videos about that. David is gonna write it down and I'm just gonna show you the measurements at the end. Okay, the heater is on, so I have to yell, but these are the measurements from the journals and the pins, like pretty consistent. 2.31, 23, 22, 21, 23, within 2/10,000ths of an inch. The journals and the pins are within 3 to 8, within 5/10,000ths, which is like very good. As long as the measurements in general are close to the spec, but I don't know what the spec is. So now David is trying to find it on his phone. I'm gonna try to find it on the computer, and because my manual I gave to my friend Eugene and I don't have it right now, so we're gonna go find the spec online and we're gonna compare these measurements to the spec. All right, I have the PDF somewhere, but I can't find it right now. For GT6, the PDF manual, but David has the TR6 manual, and I'm thinking that the crankshaft needs to have the same measurements for GT6 and TR6. And to make sure that that's true, I went on the Most Motor website, and this is what I find out. So this is for Triumph GT6 engine performance, internal engine, and when I look here at the main bearings, when I click on them, it shows me main bearing sets tri-metal, for example, and when I click on that, it shows me the main bearings, and when I say where used, it tells me these bearings are used for Triumph GT6, Triumph TR6, and Triumph TR250. So the main bearings are the same, which tells me that the crankshaft is the same. And just to make sure that the correcting rod is the same measurement too, I'm clicking on it. Rod bearing set, tri-metal, doesn't really matter which ones. And when I say were used, tells me the same thing. These bearings are used for GT6 and for TR6 and 250. So thank you, Most Motors, for this information. Now, this means that we can use the TR6 spec for that measurement. Do we know those measurements yet? Nope. No. All right, as we're scrolling here through the PDF manual of the TR6, I see something here which is interesting, that the standard bore size for the cylinders for grade A is between 2.9405 and 2.9410, and for grade B is 9411 to 9416, which is interesting. So now this, in the first place, this is TR6, it's not GT6, but I'm sure that I've seen it somewhere 9400. So if that is actually correct here and GT6 is the same as TR6, then I'm pretty close to that measurement with my cylinders. So that gives me a little bit more hope. But again, to finalize everything, I'm first gonna find the GT6 measurement before I come to any conclusion. Anyways, we're still trying to find the pins and the journal measurement, and we just can't find it in this manual. David managed to find somewhere in forums, somebody said these are the measurements, but again, this is somebody said that. We didn't find it officially anywhere.
I think it said Elin.yakov said that in the manual.
Oh, if elin.yakov said that, then it's definitely wrong. As it turns out, it's really hard to find any information that you need in this manual. So anyways, I'm going to reconfirm that later, but I'm just going to trust these numbers for now. Of course, I'm going to reconfirm them, but if we trust these numbers, like, we're really close. 311 0 to 3115, we are 31123. So our journals are even bigger than the factory in this case, which is good, because if they're worn, they're going to become small, right? So we are good for standard bearings here, and same here, 8750 to 8755, we are 8758 even. So we are 3/10,000ths of an inch bigger than the factory spec. Again, if they're worn, they're going to be smaller, right? So we are pretty good with the pins and the journals. Again, I'm going to reconfirm that. Hopefully what I found out about the cylinders of TR6 is correct. Then this is going to mean that we are only 10/10,000ths of an inch, or 1 thou bigger than the spec. Here it is the opposite though. The cylinders, when they get worn, they become bigger. So this is going to mean that we are a little bit worn, but not too much. And this is going to mean that we don't need any machining, and we can use the same pistons. We can just buy new rings. All right, let's reconfirm that. So I did a little bit of research on the internet, and I found this YouTube channel. It's very weird, like elin, I don't know what a weird name, but this guy calls himself elin.yakov's Beauties or something like that. And he was rebuilding a 75 TR6 engine, and looks like he had the same problem. He couldn't find the measurement, so let's see what he has to say about it. Alright, so I have the Bentley manual here, and I was having a really hard time to find the crankshaft measurements, but I found them here. They're actually given us a data into one of the articles here, how to remove and replace the crankshaft, not in the general specification data. Anyways, this is what it says here. The journals need to be between 2.3110 and 2.3315. Definitely that's a typo, because it can be such a big tolerance. This is almost, this is like 20 thou difference. So I went to the metric here and I converted it back to imperial, and it turns out that this is not 3, this is 1. So I'm gonna correct it here. This is 2.3115, just for future reference. And the pin's diameter is 1.8750 to 1.8755. So the measurements that Sheftar found on the forum are correct, of course, after that typo is corrected. Alright, but that's for TR6 again. We need to find the one for GT6, and I found my PDF manual finally, and it is this one, Triumph GT6 and Vitesse 2-liter workshop manual. And here in the general specification, I don't know if you can see that, let me zoom in a little bit. So here it says number of cylinders, bore of cylinders, it says 2.94 inches for GT6. And for GT6 Mark III, says as GT6. So it is the same as here. So 2.94 for the cylinders. But then we go to page 29. There we have more specifications. So let's go to the cylinders first. So the bore of the cylinders, again, there are 3 different grades. And for grade F, it needs to be 9405 to 08. Grade G is from 09 to 12, and grade H is from 13 to 16. And my cylinders are what? My cylinders are from 20 to 26. My biggest cylinder is 26. So it's 1 thou bigger than the standard, I would say. I think we are good with the cylinders. So let's go to the crankshaft now. So here for the crankshaft, it's very interesting because it says that the main bearing journal diameter needs to be 2 inches, which I don't think is correct, because that's 300 thou more than what we are finding here, right? Or less than what we're finding here. We're finding 2.3123, 122, 121, and this is like literally what it says for the TR6. We said that this measurement was correct, right? Maybe that's for some early engines, or it's only for Vitesse, but when I go back here, it says for GT6 and Vitesse. So Triumph GT6 and Vitesse 2-liter workshop manual, and these are the dimensions and tolerances. So this should be the correct measurement, but it isn't. It's not like our journals are worn, because they're bigger than this, right? They're 300 thousandths bigger than that. So I still can't find the correct spec measurement for the journals, but the crank pin is the exact same measurement as the TR6, 1875 to 55. And that's what we have here, 18750 to 18755. So I'm just gonna assume that this is the correct measurement for our journal, because it's not possible to be this one. 205, 201, I don't know where this comes from. But for the cylinders, I'm happy with what I find here, because we are just 10 thousandths over this spec. And in this case, we have almost all the information that we need now. The only other information that I will need, and I'm going to do that tomorrow, is going to be whether I need new valve guides and new valves. And I'm going to check the rocker shaft to make sure that it is not worn and it doesn't have ridges here and there. So that I'm going to do tomorrow. And then we're going to have all the information about the parts that we need to buy, but it looks like we don't need much. So fingers crossed. Okay, he's sick and tired of numbers. His brain hurts, so he's leaving.
See ya. See you next time.
Thanks for your help again.
My pleasure.
All right, so with that said, we know what we're going to do with every single part of the engine except the cylinder head and the valves. So we don't know what the condition of our valves is. We also need to figure out the condition of the valve guides. So for that reason, we need to take the head apart and inspect all that before we are able to order our parts. Just for your information though, there's a change that happened over the years with the exhaust valve. It changed diameter, from bigger became smaller, and I know that from the Most Motors website, so let's go and check that together. So if you go on the Most Motors website and go on shop by model, GT6, and then we're gonna go to engine and performance, and here this is the cylinder head, and that's why I love the Most Motors website, because I can use it for lots of information too, because it's so easy to navigate through it. So if I go to the valves, and we click, it opens our valve. So that's the inlet. We don't care about the inlet. It didn't change. The inlet is the same for all years. The exhaust is the one that changed. So the valves for the early head, for the 66 to 68 Mark I, it's not available anymore. I don't know why. I don't know what the difference is. But you can see here that from 69 to 72, which is Mark II and Mark III models, the diameter of the exhaust valve was 1.25 inches. So that's exactly the same as the TR6. And here you can see that from 73, Mark III, they switched the diameter from 1.25 to 1.195. So mine is 72, so I should be with the bigger valve, but I'm not sure. That's why we're gonna check it. So I'm gonna use my favorite valve remover tool, which is basically a vice grip, like long ridge clamp with a lock washer, like a huge lock washer welded to it here. And I can still use it as a clamp if I want to. It's homemade. So let's see what system we have here. On the TR6, the early heads were with a single spring and the later heads had double springs. So let's see what this is. Okay. So take out this. So the exhaust valves have a double collar on the top. I have single spring here, and the collar on the bottom, which I can't take out. Okay, and this collar at the bottom, there's no spacer or anything. As you know, Triumph never used valve seals, so we don't have seal here. Let me check the play. Yeah, has a lot of play. I can feel like we don't even need to measure it. It has a lot of play. So we need new valve guides for sure. But we're gonna clean the valves and see what they look like. And here's why we didn't have compression, because this never sealed. Anyways, we're gonna clean them later and we will see. So that's number one. Let's disassemble them all. So the intake valves have a single collar on the top, single spring, and the same collar at the bottom as the intake, as the exhaust. So the only difference is the top collar between the intake and exhaust. And here, this one doesn't look bad. Looks like this was sitting for 35 years closed. I don't know, we'll see. Let me measure this valve, actually, I forgot. I'm curious, so I'm quickly gonna clean this up on the wire wheel quickly. Alright, so this cleaned up pretty well. I don't think the valve is damaged, but we're gonna inspect them all at the end. Just wanna measure it. So 1,255.5. So we have the bigger valve for the early heads. Okay, let me take them all out, and then we're gonna clean them, we're gonna inspect them, and we're gonna know what we need to buy for the entire engine. That's the last thing here, right? Well, I guess this is the reason why we didn't have any compression in the cylinders, because look at that. None of the exhaust valves were closed. Maybe this one a little bit, but look at this. Here, 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 and here. All these were leaking our compression out, so that's why it had absolutely no compression. At some point I realized that I started from number 8, because this is my number 8 here, so I had to switch the valves. So this is my number 1, so the clean one is here now. Anyways, I organized them the proper way now. So now I'm gonna go on the wire wheel, I'm gonna clean them properly. I'm gonna try to clean here, and then we're gonna decide what we're gonna do with the valves. Alright, so that's it. The head is pretty clean, and happy to report that there's no cracks visible here, because just recently we rebuilt a TR6 engine and the head was cracked right here between the two valve seats, and that was a bummer, so we had to source a new head. But anyways, and this is what I used: a brass wire wheel on a drill, another brass wire wheel. This one I could put on an air tool, this one I can't, because if you see here, the shank is hex for whatever reason, so I can put it here. And only this one, I didn't have a brass wire wheel that is with this size, but with this on the drill, I was able to reach inside and clean those chambers a little bit. So yeah, we're good. I also cleaned the valves, and let me line them up and I'll show you. So that's one. So this is what everything looks like, starting from number one. You can see some of the valves don't look too bad, but some of them, even the intakes, look a little bit pitted. So they're not that expensive. I'm gonna buy new valves, especially the exhaust. You see how the color changed. I don't know if that's normal, maybe it's the original color, but I don't like that. And the seats, the exhaust seats, are all pitted. You saw some of them were rusted. Look at this one, like this cylinder was misfiring. Look at the whole entire chamber. Anyways, so that's my decision. I'm gonna buy 12 new valves. I'm gonna buy exhaust hardened seats. Unfortunately, we can't install hardened seats on the intake, because just like on TR6, the valves are very close to each other and the machine shops don't want to risk it overlapping the seats. So they just don't want to do it, but that's okay. Exhaust is what suffers from all these troubles, you know. So if we put hardened seats on the exhaust, that's gonna be perfect. So the conclusion is, I'm sorry about the hood, actually. Okay, it's cold today in the garage. I don't have the heat on because I'm not sure I'm gonna spend the whole day here, so I didn't want to turn it on. So the conclusion about this engine is that it didn't have compression, or I don't know if it had compression or not. I just turned the flywheel, if you remember in one of the previous videos, and it was spinning as if there was no pistons inside. So probably there was compression, but it was very low. So the reason for that was the exhaust valves. You see, they weren't sealing at all, so they were losing all the compression. So I'm pretty sure that was the problem. So anyways, now I know everything about this engine. I can order parts. So we have standard made bearings, standard connection rod bearings, standard rings. We're gonna reuse our pistons. The only thing that we might need to machine was gonna be the head with the hardened seats, and of course they're gonna lap the new valves in, and that's it. Everything else I know what to order, so I'm perfect. So now I'm gonna start in the next Thursdays, when I'm working on this car. I'm gonna start cleaning up the block, cleaning up all the parts for the engine, painting them and preparing them to be assembled. And if I get the parts, I'm gonna even start assembling it and putting it back together. But I'm not gonna post videos about that yet. I'm gonna film everything, but I'm not gonna post the videos yet, because I just started the same process on the TR4 engine, this one. You see, the engine is already taken out, it's over there, the transmission is on the stand. So I haven't started posting videos about that yet, but I'm gonna start, and I don't want to make it too messy. Like one video about GT6 engine, then pretty much the same work on a TR4 engine, and then people are gonna be confused. Like, didn't you say that you were gonna machine the crankshaft? Oh no, that was the TR4, not the GT6. And like, okay. So I'm gonna divide the two. So I'm gonna start posting videos about GT6 engine after I finish the videos about the TR4 engine. So it might take a while. I don't know if I'm gonna do other type of work on the GT6. So if I do, I'm gonna post the videos, but if I only work on the engine, then there's not gonna be videos about the GT6 for a while until I finish the TR4, just to avoid confusions, you know. I'm still gonna have to work on both at the same time, so I have to be careful not to mess up anything, but I'm pretty good like that, keeping information organized and multitasking. I'm okay with that. Anyways, so that's gonna be it for this video. I guess it became a little bit too long with a lot of numbers. I know that Chef Tar's brain hurts, so I'm sorry, Chef. And that's it. Let's put an end here. Let me say the usual things. Thanks for watching, thanks for commenting and subscribing, thanks for sharing and supporting the channel, thanks for everything, guys. And I say it all the time and I mean it. I don't just say it just to put an end to the video. I really mean that I appreciate what everybody does. I constantly receive emails from different people offering different ways to support me or changing their way of supporting me so far, so it is better for me actually. So anyways, I really appreciate what you do for me, guys. Again, I'm rambling, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.